there have been players of mine who initially started playing with me thinking that my name was Dan, and have in a recorded session called me Dan. And because it was during a fraught moment, a super emotional, dramatic moment, I didn't correct them because I didn't want to be like, "Oh, your character's dying." My name
By
is
the way,
my name is actually Andy. Please refer to me as Andy from now on for the duration of this series.
and also roll me a death saving throw.
Although he does say me.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Geek Peek. Today my guest is Andrew McClelland, also known as Mr. Dandy DM. Andy's a super interesting person to talk to. We had an amazing chat talking about his history of being a player, being a DM, and just being a creator on the internet. This was a very insightful chat and I think you'll enjoy it a lot. So without further ado, enjoy the interview. Andrew McClelland. I hope I'm saying your name right.
You actually said perfectly, McClellan. That was... I can't tell you how many telemarketers I've had call me and be like, McClellan? Yeah, so you did great. Thank you.
Before we actually dive into all the projects you've been involved with, the things that you started, I want to take you back even before your persona, Mr. Dandy DM, began. What was it like to be Andrew before you started creating content?
So Andrew, me, I was back in 2013. I had just moved to Chicago. I had finished college in Michigan, and I was moving to Chicago to pursue being an actor full time. And I sort of hit the ground running in Chicago, and I was performing and I was auditioning, and I love Chicago. I love everything about this city. And mainly because I'm from Massachusetts, and so spending time in Boston, there's sort of a very sort of familiar environment or attitude with Chicago and Boston people. But I came here and I was working, and I was just living that struggling, starving artist lifestyle, and it was difficult. It was hard. It was it was a grind, and that was all like very much sort of like I had an Instagram account, but that was all like very like social media conscious. Like I had no idea of what it was to create content at all. I was just like, oh, I have a phone, I have a camera, I'm going to take a pretty picture, or what I think is a pretty picture, and I'll post it, and people will like it or they won't. And in terms of just my life, like I would say the last 10 years, I got engaged, I got married, I have 2 kids. I am, for all intents and purposes, I haven't been in a play in over, or in a what you would consider a traditional actor role in over probably 5 years. And part of that was due to the fact that I realized as we were moving out of the city, we were also getting prepared to have our first child. And so I decided to, acting is going to take a back seat for a hot second. We're gonna let that lie. I'm not giving up on it. But it was one of those things where I realized I really didn't want to half-ass parenting or being a good spouse at all. And I really just wanted to focus and not half-ass this. I wanted to whole-ass it, and I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it well. And I know that was the right choice. And then the pandemic happened. It didn't kill it, but it definitely like thoroughly wounded it. Like it's currently, in terms of professionally acting on a stage or in front of a studio audience or a camera of some kind that isn't this, that wound, it's not a killing blow per se, but it's definitely, we're bleeding out right now. This is my mode of performance now, and I don't think that's a bad thing. In fact, during the pandemic, or actually just sort of pre-pandemic, just very briefly pre-pandemic, I worked for a real estate company called Redfin, and I was on a plane coming back from Atlanta. We were coming back from a work conference, and I was sitting next to one of my coworkers, and she was talking to me about things that we used to do when we were, in high school or junior high, and fun things that kids used to do when we were young nerds. And I was listening. We were talking about music and film and old TV shows, and we were just commiserating. And then she dropped this on me. She was just like, "You know what I haven't done in a long time, Andy?" I was like, "What?" "I haven't played D&D." And I was like, "Okay. Well, I haven't played TTRPGs since I was in junior high." Or not junior high, but I started playing in junior high, and I haven't played since college. We should get a game together. Let's see what happens. And she was like, "Yeah, we should totally do that." So we got a bunch of people from the office together. We all rolled up character sheets, and then the day came when we were going to play, and then they were like, "Okay, so who's the DM?" And we all started looking at each other, and I realized I was the only person who had any kind of GM experience whatsoever, and they elected me as their DM. And that's kind of how it all began, because we played 2 sessions in person, and that was end of February of 2020. And then March 2nd of 2020, we got sent home from work. And we were told, "You know what? We'll have you back in 2 weeks. Everybody's going to mask up. We're all going to mask up. We're all going to mask up, right? We're all masking up. Good. Okay. And in 2 weeks, it'll be done. We'll be done. You'll come back." Sure enough. 2 weeks later, oh no. This is going to be a longer haul than we anticipated. and so initially, during those 2 weeks, we realized, because we were playing weekly, I was scrambling to sort of figure out, like, are we still good? Do we still want to play? And every single one of them said, yeah. And sort of it's kind of weird just to not get emotional about it, because that group, or certain members of that group of people, that campaign that started in 2020 has been going on till now. And in fact, it'll be 4 years in March that we've been playing together. And that, I think, I don't know. I feel like that's got to be something special.
That's amazing. Is that campaign something that is a home game? Like, it's not published anywhere? It's just you and your friends?
Yeah, it's just myself and my friends. Because to even go a little bit more pre-pandemic, the world that I created, the world of Odromia, is a homebrew world set in a sort of using the Dungeons and Dragons rule set, 5e, and it was originally created as a first treatment for a novel that I wanted to work on and wanted to publish. And I had created sort of the foundational aspects of the world. I had outlined everything. I had talked about what magic was in the world, and I'd sort of built this whole thing that I was eventually going to completely do a first draft on. And then the Dungeons and Dragons campaign happened along, and I was like, well, why don't I see what happens when I take D&D and put it on top of this world and sort of use all of the names and lore that I have, and then I've always been curious what it would look like if players became characters then played in the world that I had created.
Wow, that's amazing.
To their credit, every single one of them became still are super invested in it. In fact, we were just talking yesterday about and we're always talking about like things that we wanted to do or people are, my players are sending me memes about things that they want to accomplish as their character, or crazy stuff that they want to do. Like one of my friends who currently lives in California, he plays the dwarf barbarian in our campaign, and he's talking to me about how he actually, like, his entire life goal is to become a chef on a cruise liner that he owns. And, like, cool. I mean, that's an idea. That is a fantastic idea that is so far out there, but I love it. Let's see what we can do to make that happen. But to your question, like, what was Andrew, what was Andy about, or what was he like prior to becoming Mr. Dandy DM? So yeah, actor, parent, or actor, husband, parent. I was very much I was very much a nerd. Like, if I'm being honest, I've been a nerd for a long time. My mom will tell you that, like, I've been acting since I was a child, for good or for bad. But I was a very much a theater kid. Like, I was the kid who would go to the reenacting towns in, like, New England, old New England. Like, there's this place in Massachusetts called Deerfield, like the village of Old Deerfield, which is like this entirely, like, old, like, still authentic, preserved town. And my mom put me in breeches and what is the Seinfeld thing? Oh, I don't want to be a pirate. And he's wearing his pirate shirt. That was basically me. I was that kid, and I would perform in a place in Deerfield called the One Room Schoolhouse, and I would read, like, old books to the class, and I would perform that way. And people would visit, and they would watch me do that, and then be like, "Oh, this is what it must have looked like back in the old days." But then through the process of going to, like, school, I developed a really, like, I was almost obsessive about my love for Shakespeare and
Oh, wow.
of just classical literature, and like, Edith Hamilton's mythology is still probably one of my favorite books. And I think what sort of, if the two things can sort of dovetail together, it was Edith Hamilton's mythology, and I sort of loved sort of the ancient stories of how we get the mythology, like how we got the mythologies of olden times, and then how we arrive at, like, Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion. The Silmarillion, like, Lord of the Rings, the entire trilogy is excellent. I love it. And The Hobbit is fantastic. And my mom actually just bought me, shoot, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's one of his unfinished works, or it's one of his works that most people don't really know about or read. But she bought it for me because she knew that I'm a Tolkien fan. And the Silmarillion was always my favorite in terms of the Tolkien works, because it was all world building, all of it, from the creation of the world all the way through to where you sort of see us today with, like, the hobbits. But yeah, that was I was the nerd, and then my love for Shakespeare sort of, like, made me pursue acting.
That's amazing. I resonate with a lot of things you said, and while you were speaking, I also wrote a few notes about things I want to dive into. Okay, so you also mentioned real estate, and for some reason that struck out to me. Real estate is like, not always, but in some cases can be seen as salesy and a little bit sleazy, and, like, going into real estate, what was your, like, mindset? Was that something that you love, or is that something that you kind of, like, said, I have to do this, this will help me survive, or, like, what was the reason?
So Initially, it was very much a survival job. And to be clear, I'm not a real estate agent. I do not buy or sell anything. I am in charge of trying to figure out how to do this without giving you a 30-second pitch about what I do. Uh, Screw it, I'll do it. So you know how, I don't know if you're familiar with Redfin at all, but Redfin is a real estate technology company that basically we have our own real estate agents. We're a full service brokerage. So you can go on our website and you can look up a home and you can request a real estate agent to show you that home. And that real estate agent will be a Redfin agent. And they will be able to take you through that first tour all the way through to potentially buying that property. When you put in that first initial request that then gets sent to a person in the Redfin company called a tour coordinator. That tour coordinator will work with the Redfin agent, the client, and the listing agent to ensure that that tour takes place. And my job, as in the title that I have, which is known as a lead coordinator, I am the lead coordinator for what is known as the East team. So we handle New York, we handle Jersey, we handle Atlanta, or the Georgia, Atlanta area, and we also handle some other markets in there as well. My job is very much to train and mentor the people on the East team to help them work through certain difficulties or problems that they might encounter in their day-to-day, answer difficult questions that they might have regarding certain policy decisions or certain policy things that might crop up every now and then. My job is also to make sure that all teams across the United States, I work with a small team myself of other lead coordinators who we make sure that we have adequate coverage across all of the teams to make sure that all the requests are able to be fielded at any given time. But yeah, the key thing that I think I would probably say in terms of my job is the mentoring and coaching aspect. And that is something that I really do enjoy. That's why I've been doing the job for over 7 years. Or actually, I was coming into the job, I was a tour coordinator, and I worked that job for 4 years, and now I've been 3 years doing the job of a lead coordinator. But the lead coordinator is very much, I think, the thing that really speaks to my actual skills and strengths. I'm the kind of person who really wants to see people activated, to see people enthused, to see people really access their own abilities and their own strengths, and really help people to realize that they are exceptional at doing certain things. It's not all about like interacting, it's not all about the phone conversation, the text conversation, but who you are as a person. Like, what strengths you possess as a person, and how can I, as a person, given my strengths, help you access those on your day to day. So yeah, that's the kind of work that really speaks to me. But in terms of how I initially got into Redfin, yes, it was very much real estate was never where I thought I would end up in terms of a day job. But in very many ways, it was. It came together as sort of a perfect storm. Like, I was freshly married, and then my wife and I were thinking about having kids, and we were just like, I need to have a stable job that doesn't require me, given my career as an actor, to be potentially out of work for X, Y, or 1, 2, 3, however many months, without health insurance. So yeah, that's how I arrived at real estate.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad I let you explain that further, because what you do is so much more than what I initially thought, which was a real estate agent. It's like human development. It's
yeah, that's exactly what it is.
It's amazing. Okay, you also mentioned before the world that you built, and I will also combine this with another note that you mentioned, which you said you wanted to write a novel.
Mhm.
And writing is one of the topics that speaks to my soul really directly, because I also have a world that I built, but I did not write. Like I do have like an unfinished draft, which
Mhm.
I tackle every NaNoWriMo. Uh, but you had the opportunity to see your world kind of fleshed out with your players in terms of like diving into things that you came up with that your players are actually now using.
Mhm.
So walk me through like what's the process of like taking your idea, taking your initial idea, developing it into a world, and then also when you see your players start using it, uh, are is there a moment where their decisions inform your world building?
So in terms of the question, there's two parts. What was my initial sort of like process going into it? And
Yes.
then do I allow my players agency in terms of the decisions that they make? And then like what their decisions, what the consequences of the decisions, do they influence the world?
Yes.
So first part, when I initially set out to write the novel, I very much was not writing in the mind of like I'm going to write a D&D campaign, or I'm going to write something that is Dungeons and Dragons adjacent. Um, it was very much a novel that I wanted to feature my kids. I was initially writing it um, for my son because I wanted him to be a hero in the story, and so that was the way I wrote the world. And in the back of my mind, like, or even in my notes, really, like the the camp or the book was going to be very much fantasy, 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 and then suddenly at the very end, when the hero thinks that they've triumphed, suddenly at the very end of the first book, aliens are going to come down, or not, maybe not even aliens, but it was going to be something where we suddenly realize, oh, there's sci-fi. There's like we've been on this one world that is entirely self-contained. We think this is the world of the universe. This is all there is. And then suddenly a spaceship arrives. But
Wow, I'm getting Brandon Sanderson vibes.
but the thing oh but geez. The thing that really sort of wrapped me up was that I knew that was how I wanted to end the first book. But then I got really like obsessed about writing the prologue. Prologue? Pro is before. Yes, the
Yes.
prologue. And the prologue was entirely taking place on a spaceship as it's crash landing into the planet, and it's only by the end, or maybe like midway through the fourth act, that you realize that the ship that crash landed on this world is actually the reason for why this world exists in the way that it does, and sort of the fantasy. And so it's this weird sort of amalgam marriage between sci-fi and fantasy. And that was how the world of Adromia initially began. That being said, given that it is now sort of a world that it very much is sort of taking place in sort of a D&D minded context, I've sort of stripped out the sci-fi elements just so that my players can sort of like, because when we initially started out, all of the players, they were not experienced 5e. Like some had played Dungeons and Dragons, but none of them had ever played 5e before. And so I wanted to give them the opportunity to just be like, all right, yes, this world is homebrew, but these rules are easy to understand. You can definitely hack these. I'm not going to throw suddenly spaceships at you. And so that was the entire thing. Here and there, though, I have injected little bits of sci-fi back into the campaign, or maybe sort of like quasi steampunk sci-fi elements, because the world is kind of a weird amalgam of both sort of high fantasy meets steampunk meets like I don't know, whatever you would consider Treasure Planet to be.
Okay.
Have you seen Disney's Treasure Planet?
I did not, but
Okay.
I think I know what you're talking about. I'm not
So
sure.
like the concept that like space travel can be accomplished through like vessels that look like actual like sailing ships in space. That is, I mean, that is also a concept that is very D&D, but like I sort of leaned into it for this world. And there is a character, and I'm just going to shout him out right now if you don't mind. There's a creator online, and I believe you've actually interviewed them. Janasi Kwa.
Yes, Natakwa is my best friend.
Janasi Kwa is a guest or has been a guest a couple of times in my campaign. And they play a character known as Rex Souza, and he is a blue-furred bugbear ranger inventor. And he is actually the inventor responsible for the technology that allows these ships to become from going from naval vessels to actually like sky ships. And so that sort of goes right into the second question. Do I allow my players to be creators or agents of change in the world that I've built? 100%. There are consequences and there are decisions that are made by my players pretty much every session that has influenced the mythology and the world and the homebrew of it all pretty much from first session.
Wait,
And
so
go ahead.
Hunter is in your home game?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, he was so this was the thing. Hunter and I he and I met via TikTok Live. Like we hopped. It was my first time on TikTok Live, or maybe it was my second time. But back when I was first initially doing TikTok, I I was new to TikTok. I was new to TikTok Live. I had just gotten 1,000 followers, I think, and that was sort of like the benchmark or the standard or metric you had to hit in order to actually get access to Live. And so I was first on Live, and I was making pancakes for my kids, which is a regular thing that I used to do back when I first started TikTok. Was I would just go on Live because making pancakes was sort of a downtime for me, and I would just be making pancakes, and I would talk to people while I was making pancakes. And can I say pancakes a couple more times? And so I would just talk to people, and then Janasi Kwa, who I had been following for a long time, because I cannot say enough how much I love like all the stuff that they do with puppets and all of the ways that they make these stories happen. And also like they are an incredibly gifted poet and artist, and they're a fantastic storyteller. And I think that D&D is a good outlet for them, but that's not the only thing that they're good at. I think that they are just this multi-talented. It's impossible to put them in a box in any way. Like they're multi-talented. They're super passionate and also very empathetic, and they're a good friend. And I ended up like ended up talking to each other about D&D, and I mentioned my world, and they were like, "Oh, I'd really love to guest in your campaign sometime." And I was like, "Say less." And so I invited them, and I I had such a fun time introducing them, because it was like every time I have a guest come on to the show, it's always a surprise or not even show, because it's not a show. My campaign. Anytime I have someone guest in my campaign, they will be like, they'll surprise the group, because people normally assume it's an NPC, right? They won't assume that it's another PC.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
so Rex Souza was unveiled. I think it was like session like 35 or 40, because I knew number all my sessions like chapters in a book. And so at this point, like I have well over hundreds of pages of notes, or not notes, recaps of sessions. And that they were featured like midway through. They came on the scene, and since then they played like 7 sessions initially with us, but then they have come back as of the new year. Actually, New Year's Eve, I did a well, that's getting ahead of myself. I answered the question that you asked, which was, do my players affect the world? They 100% absolutely do.
No, but now I'm actually interested in what you were about to say.
Okay, well, so I have this main campaign, which is not published, but I also have these other campaigns that I have done, which are published. They are the Survivors of Ashkelon and Shadows of Ashkelon. And then there's this one shot that I did with 2 other TikTok creators who are very, very big in the cosplay scene. All of it takes place, or those 3 adventures take place or initially centered around the city of the capital city of Ashkelon, which is, or the Ashkelon, the capital city of the kingdom of Nimrion. And it always revolves around the fall of this city. And the city falls because it fell. The city falls, and that's always the central tenet of each of these mini series, because in the main campaign, the city fell.
Okay.
And so certain decisions that happened as a result of the adventurers in the main campaign caused the city to fall in such a way that it was cataclysmic. It was seismic shift. There are forces at work that technically are above and beyond the main adventurers' pay grades. Like they're like they needed much bigger help for whatever was happening, and they didn't get it. And that had a lot to do with the decisions that they had made in previous sessions. And so they, the people in the main campaign, they watched the city burn, and then they escaped. But then with each of the other, with the survivors and shadows, they all get to see the city fall from a different perspective. In the survivors of Ashkelon, there are members of the adventuring party who are there as spies. They're spies in the city. So it's very sort of like Blades in the Dark in that way. Like they're there for their own reasons, and then they realize, oh my God, something's about to happen in this city, and we got to get the heck out of Dodge, like right now. And they do. They do make it, barely. In Shadows of Ashkelon, there's even more of a buy-in with the characters, because one of the characters actually is connected with a deity that has this epic battle above the city. That basically, picture, I always use this in terms of the reference for people. Have you seen the movie Man of Steel? Superman, yes. General Zod. Basically, each impact General Zod and Superman make against each other, whether they're hitting each other or kicking it, whatever, there's massive destruction just by the impacts alone. And so it was very much like that in terms of painting a picture of watching these 2 titans of the planes of existence go at each other and causing the widespread destruction of this city. But one of these characters has a buy-in because they're their patron. And so they watch it from that perspective. The most recent show that I'm going to be actually just recorded the first session of this past weekend is called Our Flag Means Doom. And it is a pirate-themed campaign. Yes, it is sort of a play on Our Flag Means Death, but I actually just found out that Our Flag Means Death is being canceled after season 2, which is so sad because I love that show. But Our Flag Means Doom is connected to the fall of Ashkelon, but it is also seeing the world from a different perspective. And so with each of these different shows, and in the main campaign as well, I've been able to explore aspects of my world without ever actually having to like, I've written about it and I've laid the groundwork for it, but then I get to watch the players experience it and do stuff to it. And it's every single session I get to be that guy in that dinosaur movie that is just like, welcome to Jurassic Park. And they just go and do stuff, and then the dinosaurs kill them.
Okay,
so,
I gotta ask you, like, both of those campaigns that you mentioned that are online, if I understood correctly, they are kind of ripples of what happened in your main campaign.
yes.
And the main campaign is offline. It's something that we don't get to see. But those campaigns that are featuring the fall of the city, are those kind of like Calamity style?
Yes.
The adventure ends when the city falls?
With the survivors of Ashkelon, the city falls within the first 2 episodes, and they get on a boat, and they rescue this woman whose husband has just been killed, and they get her onto the boat as well after they've defeated this vampire, and they get them on the boat and they sail away, and as they're sailing away, they watch from the ocean as from the back of the boat. They got to see the whole thing happen, and the thing that they see that is the thing that causes them to pause is the fact that in the religious section of the city where all the temples exist, in Ashkelon, it's called the Starriness District. The temples begin to glow with a green, like sickly greenish hue, and then they disappear. And so not only is the city being destroyed, but the temples, the anchors for the gods themselves to the material plane, to the world of Odromia, are being taken out. And so there's this multi-tiered plan that several different BBEGs are working on to like set Odromia adrift. But with Shadows, the city doesn't fall in the first couple sessions. It takes 5 sessions, and they get to see the city before it falls and see what life was like, and how not ideal by any means, like no perfect cities exist. It's not a utopia, but it is a city where, even though there might be political upheaval and there is a war that's happening in the north, we've heard about that war. You know, the elves are invading perhaps in the north, and they're coming down, but you know, our King Gleef, he's taking his army north. He's going to be fine. We'll win out in the end. We're the human kingdom of Nimrion. You get to hear all that, and you get to feel all that sort of, you know, there's joy, and there's, you know, this feeling of, you know, hope. And then you get to watch it all just get annihilated. Because, and again, players do have agency and players do make choices, but the players in Shadows, at least in the first 5 episodes, because after episode 5 the cast changes slightly. There is one cast member who is still apart, who was there in the first 5, but then suddenly there are 2 different cast members, because of a teleportation skill or a spell gone awry. And so they find themselves thousands of miles away from Ashkelon, and having witnessed the city fall, and now they have to figure out what to do.
That's amazing. Okay, you have those campaigns. You have your main campaign. You have the joy of being in the front row seat of seeing how your world is being inhabited by people, by characters who are actual peoples in your world. All of that is kind of like working with your skill as a DM. I do want to backtrack a little bit to kind of build our way to that. So walk me through, like, we talked about your inspirations. We also talked about uh, kind of like your world building and what that led to in terms of those campaigns. Uh, let's backtrack a bit and walk me through what leads you to kind of uh, like adopt the moniker Dandy DM and start publishing content online.
So I I think I mean for the most part I feel like all of us when the pandemic first happened and TikTok was sort of coming to like everyone's, consciousness, because I know initially it started off as like, it's just a fun little app for, the kiddies, they'll they like to there's dancing that happens on it, right? People dance to popular music or whatever, they record it, post it and whatever. That was all I knew of TikTok. I didn't have TikTok, but then it started to like suddenly I started to like hear things that more and more people were posting on it. Even still, I was just like, well, is it any different than Instagram? Is it any different? Social media is fake, like whatever. And I was very much like almost anti kind of social media. Like I didn't use Facebook anymore. I didn't use Instagram hardly at all. I actually remember making bets with myself fairly early on, like how long can I go before posting another thing on Instagram? Oh, cool. Then TikTok just just sort of gaining steam, and I would start to see things from people posting on other apps something about TikTok, and so I just downloaded it, and I initially approached it very much as I think everyone did, as a consumer. Like we were consuming the media, we were consuming everything that was being fed to us, and partly I think it had a lot to do with the fact that we weren't entirely trusting the information that we were getting during the pandemic from the regular media. And so, or maybe not that we weren't trusting it, but we wanted other sources, other regular people like you and I to tell us what their experiences were and sort of, putting all that information together and making a decision about it. I'm not going to say doing your own research because that's anyway.
That's not TikTok.
Yeah. So that was how I initially approached it. But then as I was, consuming it, I would start to see more and more material by certain creators. And then I realized that was because I was liking that material. And the algorithm was then just feeding me more of that. And so I was liking a lot of Star Wars content, Tolkien content, any fantasy content, anything involving anyone painting a mini, dice. Like I remember seeing the first dice video on there. But yeah, it was all just stuff that sort of spoke to me as just a nerd. Anything to do with like a film review or film commentary, that was a big thing. Oddly enough, I didn't see a lot of acting things on there. And I'm actually really happy about that because that actually helped direct me in a different way. But that was sort of how I initially approached TikTok. As I started to watch this and consume all of this sort of nerd content, I was seeing stuff about people talk about their D&D campaigns and talk about Dungeons and Dragons specifically. And I realized, oh, I have a D&D campaign. I have stuff going on in my campaign. I have stories that I'm telling right now. I should maybe do that too. And so I did. My first videos were... There's another TikTok creator out there named Emily Graymore. And they are a part of Rally, which is another D&D podcast, and they initially posted this sort of TikTok survey, like put a finger down if you've ever done this as a DM or GM, and then they did a secondary video, put a finger down as a player if you've ever done this. And those were, I think, my first videos that I did on TikTok. And
like duets. to her?
I was using her audio. I was using her audio, and I would just do the fingers, and then. But those were my first videos, and then I just started to continue to do things. And when I figured out that you could use other sound, like you could use sounds and you could do lip syncing, I started to get good at the lip syncing part of it. And so a lot of my videos were initially just lip syncing, and that was when I created this other OC, like original character cosplay character that I developed called Mr. Good Patron. And Mr. Good Patron, he's this very silly looking, foppish, red coat wearing, straw hat wearing, cravat wearing creature. Sort of like very Tom Bombadil-esque, but if Tom Bombadil also existed in Bridgerton vibes. That's something I just thought of, and I was just like, well, actually, no, actually, that does fit. Yeah, Tom Bombadil, this very fey, mythological, Tolkien-esque creature, but also Bridgerton, very period, very gentry. So yeah, he was sort of this otherworldly character that I created because I was seeing a lot of like very edgy cosplay creators who were doing a lot of things with warlock patrons through D&D warlock patrons, but they were all very dark and they were very edgy and they were all like very cruel in some ways, and they were all like very manipulative. And I was like, well, I want to do that, but I want to put a different spin on it. Like I want this guy to be like very celestial, almost very like benevolent, very kind, and just very concerned about his warlock's general like mood, and like always very concerned about their well-being. Like, hey, maybe give yourself a hug, kind of vibe. And people responded to that. People really liked Mr. Good Patron, and I still do Mr. Good Patron from time to time, but I don't do that as much. And through that process, I think I initially, my initial username on TikTok was the Mr. DM Andy. Mr. DM Andy was, I think, my first name on TikTok. And I realized that after I had made that name, I saw a bunch of other creators out there who had like the same kind of formula for names. It was like Mrs. DM something, Mr. DM Chad, and I was just like, I need to figure out a way of differentiating myself, and that was when Andy got way too clever for his own good, because that was when Mr. Dandy DM came into being. Mr. Dandy DM, if you look at it, it does look like Mr. Dandy DM. But in my mind, thinking super cleverly about the whole thing, it was Mr. D and D DM.
Oh.
That is it. That is so like if you look at my name down here, Mr. D and D DM. That was, and it also was cool because in my mind, again, super clever. It incorporated my name into it, Andy. So that was why I did it that way.
I gotta tell you, the first time I saw your username, I did not read it as Dandy DM. I read it as Dan Die DM.
Oh, wow. I'm really screwed. I've used that. I've had that name for so long now. There have been people who know me who think my first name is Dan. They do not think, they don't know that my name is actually Andrew and I go by Andy. Yeah. There have even been players of mine, I'm not going to name names, but there have been players of mine who initially started playing with me thinking that my name was Dan and have in a recorded session called me Dan, and because it was during a fraught moment, a super emotional, dramatic moment, I didn't correct them because I didn't want to be like, oh, your character's dying. My name is actually Andy. Please refer to me as Andy from now on for the duration of this series.
And also roll me a death saving throw.
Roll me a death saving throw. So And unfortunately, because I didn't correct him in that moment, they kept calling me Dan until finally in a Discord, I'm just like, hey, my name's Andy. So if you go back, I think it's in the Survivors. It actually might be both Shadows and Survivors. There are both moments where a certain player will call me Dan, and I'll just be like, oh. You'll see the light behind my eyes slowly die for a brief second. I don't really care that much. It really isn't that big of a deal. I'm being way too dramatic about it. But
No,
that's
it's
sort
funny.
of the adventure I've had with that username. And at this point, it's like I've had it so long, I'm not gonna lose it now.
So, in terms of like, okay, you begin your journey on TikTok, and like I noticed now you have like over 30,000 followers on TikTok, over 28,000 on Instagram, also presences around Twitch and YouTube as well. Like when you started creating content, what was your kind of goal as a creator?
Didn't
Did you
have one.
have like anything in mind,
No,
or
didn't.
just publishing?
Yeah, just I started during the pandemic, so it was really just a way to pass the time, to create some dumb content that people might laugh at. Um, it was a way of kind of distracting myself from how heavy and dark everything in the world just was. And if I'm being honest, the world hasn't gotten a hell of a lot better.
That's true.
That's not a way of saying, and that's why I keep creating content, because I want to distract myself by how awful the world is. No, it's I just to say I didn't initially start off with a plan. I very much was using it as a way of escaping, a way of sort of being an encouraging word at times to people, especially during my lives, because when people would first encounter my content, they might like it, and then what would happen is the algorithm would then send them to a live of mine whenever I would go live. And then during that live, I would always be sort of, they would see the person that you're talking to now. They wouldn't necessarily see the character of this, Mr. Dandy DM. They would see Andy. And it was just a chance for me to sort of access the strengths that I have genuinely as a person and really want to wish the best for other people, because it was sort of just all of it was sort of happening, and like everyone was isolated, everyone was dealing with the pandemic in their own ways, and even during the periods after the pandemic when we're all sort of like re-entering civilian life and not like isolated survivalist life, it was a way of sort of just reaching out and touching people in an encouraging way, and in a way that sort of built people up and gave people like reasons to keep on moving, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I just know from a lot of my friends who went through like very, very dark periods during the pandemic. Like a lot of things changed for so many people that I know. And some for the better, but I would say the majority, like if we're watching like a graph of people's lives, like they're going like this and then they're going like this, and then the pandemic happened and it levels off and then it goes down, sharp decline, and now people are starting to sort of like pick themselves up, but they're still not where they were up here.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's all been, I've been a part of that in some way.
Okay. So you start creating content, you resonate with people. What's the moment when you decide to publish campaigns online and start DMing in live streams?
So I started, the reason for why I started putting stuff online was because I had just gotten the opportunity to run an entire campaign, or not run a campaign, but be a voice actor in a campaign with Cast Party D&D. And I ended up playing this druid character in that campaign That campaign went for 18 episodes, and it was such a great experience. It was such a great experience. And I think at the time when I had finished it, I was about to hit 15,000 followers on TikTok. And I realized, you know what? I haven't done anything for the people who follow me as a way of saying thank you for following me. Like, thank you for joining me on this ride, this crazy ride called life. So when I hit 15K, I was like, we're going to do a contest. Let's everybody create these characters for a one-shot. Create an original character that you've always wanted to play, a concept that you've always wanted to do, like a class race combination that you've never had the opportunity to ever play through or test. And I will run a one-shot for you. In retrospect, that was a really dumb idea. Because if you are first jumping into a new character that you've always wanted to play, and you've created this backstory for, and you've gone through and you've put all their spells down, and you've figured out exactly their dynamic and how they're going to work with the group, and how they're going to maybe interact with this world that takes place in a homebrew universe that this other guy created, you're not going to be able to do anything effective in one session. I don't care how long that session is. It's not going to do it for you. And so in the first series that I did, is still running, Survivors of Ashkelon, it all stemmed from that one contest at 15K.
Oh wow.
They created these characters, and we finished the first session and we're like, okay, so we're doing a 2-shot. We're going to do a 2-shot. We'll do a second session. We'll see what happens. And they got to witness the fall of Ashkelon from their perspective. And they get on a boat. And by the end of that session, as they're sailing away, watching the cities completely disintegrate into nothingness, they're all like, so we're back next week, like we're doing this again. Like, and I was like, if you want, I have other things like I have written that I can totally do with you guys if you want. And they were like, okay, yeah, see you next week. And so we did.
Awesome.
That's basically how that whole thing started. And the same thing with Shadows of Ashkelon. Was initially started as a initially started as like a 1/2 shot, because it was at that time that I was sort of realizing that, oh, this idea is a dumb idea. I really need to expand this out a bit more. And then that became Shadows of Ashkelon, and we have 5 episodes there, and we're going to be playing our 6th episode on Wednesday. And then with Our Flag Means Doom, I did another contest when I hit 30K, and I said this is for a 5-shot. This is going to be a 5-shot campaign, and I said when I did my session zeros with the players, I am under no illusions that you will want to be done at 5. Okay, we can be done at 5. I have written what I have written, but I also have all of this stuff that we can totally do. And so at the end of episode 4 that we've recorded, after we've recorded that episode, I'll consult with each of you. If you still want to go, we can finish it at episode 5 if you want to be done. Or if you want to keep going, we will have another session 0 to determine what the overall goals and trajectory we want to accomplish. And then we will continue from there. We'll do another 5 episodes. But it's one of those things where I now have like an additional session 0 baked into these series, because I don't want to just assume that players want to keep going, and I also want to make sure that players are also, if they do, there's an expectation there that's built in from me and for them about what they want to achieve. I'm just thinking about like all of the things, like as a dungeon master, like how I've grown in the last almost 4 years. Almost 4 years. Just in terms of like being like very safe with players. Not that I was unsafe or like problematic or toxic in any way, or not outwardly so, but like just there were so many things that I didn't know and weren't built. Like the concept of safety tools and consent forms for players, that was something that is brand new that I never had growing up. I really should have, because there were plenty of things that happened to me as a player growing up that weren't great, and I wished I'd had, and I'm very glad that I do, and I'm very glad that I have that for my players with all the adventures that we do.
Okay. I love that you bring this up right now, because that kind of leads me to my next question. If you had to go through a time spell and go back to Andy from a few years ago, before all of this happened, all of this started, and give that Andy advice, what would you say?
What would I tell myself? Don't assume. Don't assume what a player is thinking. Ask them. Don't assume that because I can't tell you like how many times initially when I started DMing my main campaign, I would just assume that my players were just like we're good, right? We're all good. And then I would find out like in the Discord they'd privately DM me and they'd be like, actually there was something that you did just it rubbed me the wrong way, and it's because I'm going through this in my own personal life and you didn't know about it, but like I would really appreciate if you could just be mindful of that in the future. And I would take that and be like, oh, 100%, I'm so sorry, I didn't know that was the case, I can definitely be better about that. So yeah, constantly checking in with your players, making sure there's always open communication, making sure there's always a safe space for them to come to you and just share what their thoughts are, because it's a collaborative story. It's never just you. It's never just the DM. It's never, because like if it's just the DM, then just go write your own novel. Just go do that, because that way you don't end up hurting anyone, anyone real.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just very happy for just constant communication. And I think that in that way, like, I mean, you want to play with your friends, right? You don't want to play with somebody who doesn't like you or you don't like yourself. So yeah, always open and honest communication. And like consent forms are good. Please use a consent form. Yeah. Yep, session zeros, 100%.
Okay. So we talked about you. We talked about your inspirations, how you got to where you are. There's only one logical question left, which is also the last.
Okay.
Before we actually get to that question, I do want you to tell anybody listening or watching this, where should they go after watching this conversation with you? Where do you want to lead them next?
Okay. So currently, all of the published content that I have online is either on my TikTok, my Instagram, but all of the campaign stuff, all of the shows that I do, for right now, that is the Survivors of Ashkelon, that is the it's called Shadows of Ashkelon, and then there is Our Flag Means Doom. Our Flag Means Doom is not up yet. I am still in the editing process for the first episode, but that should be coming out very soon. And then I will, of course, have other series that I will be doing. But I'm also currently starting to experiment with things to do with Twitch. And sort of in terms of like having a live audience for a campaign. Because I want a way of better accessing like the audience. I want people to actually like be a sort of a semi-participant as they're watching it. in the same way that Critical Role or, you know, any number of actual plays on Twitch right now are doing it, where they have this audience, this following that are just there watching it as it's happening. That's what I want. I don't necessarily want to have to edit my shows down to from a 4-hour like playing experience down to a 2-hour palatable episode length, because that is a lot of pressure on me to edit things. So I'm also in the next couple months, I'm also going to start putting all of the episodes that you see on YouTube onto Spotify, so you'll be able to watch it in podcast form.
So I'll have all of your handles also in the description of the video or the podcast. And now I want to ask you the final question. And that is, what's in the future of Andy?
The future for Andy is to, in the short term, go on a trip to Scotland in the summer. Then potentially renovate a portion or build out a portion of my house, because my wife and I want to have more kids. So we need to give ourselves more living space in order to do that. So that's in the short term. In the long term, I want to continue to grow the shows that I'm doing. I want to continue to go to the conventions that I've been going to. So this year I'll be going to PAX East, Gen Con, and then PAX U. So if you're at PAX East and you want to say hello, please say hello. And I will say hello back. But that's also just in the short term. But continue to go to the conventions, continue to have like an influence on the TTRPG sphere. I want to continue to also just have opportunities to perform in actual plays as a way of acting, because I don't consider myself not to be an actor anymore just because I'm not on a stage or in front of a studio camera or anything like that. I do still consider this to be a form of acting, because on its very basic level, it is storytelling. Acting is storytelling. You are taking on the skin, the clothes of the character, and you are performing as if you are that character. And so that's what TTRPGs are. And so that's what I want to continue to do. I want to continue to act in this space. In the long term, I would love to do an in-person, game at some point. In terms of social media, ultimately, I don't care. In terms of my growth on social media, whether people continue to follow me or they don't, it doesn't really matter to me. I'm kind of at that point where I'm just like, I'm just uncomfortable with the rat race of it all, if that makes sense. I'm uncomfortable chasing an algorithm. I don't need to do that. I'm just very happy just connecting with people. And maybe that's just very post-pandemic thoughts as Andy, because pandemic Andy didn't have any way of interacting with people except for online. And now we're re-entering the world, and I really just, like, seriously, Oren, if you were living in Milwaukee, or if you were living in Chicago, or if you were living in Detroit, even, I would go to you. I would travel to you, and we would have this interview face to face. Wow. The world being what it is, you live where you live, I live where I live. But yeah, if we were in closer proximity, I would jump in my car, and I would do that over doing it in this sort of capacity.
Okay, that's amazing. I love that.